All right. Happy Monday, everyone. Daishion Miller here from Warrior Concepts with this week's episode of KUDEN. So, if you're one of my local guys or you've done the online version of the course, right, in our instructor training program, one of the lessons that we teach very early on is we cover the difference between a coach, an instructor, and a teacher. And I want to touch on those this evening because they're not the same. But we actually want to go past that to this idea of mentor, right? And finding a mentor or learning from a mentor. And we're going to cover things from a couple of different angles. But as the promotional slide and information and stuff that went out kind of pointed to, there's a little secret in there that people tend to miss, right? So we're going to talk about that and more as soon as we get started.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
Really? Well, that's my story anyway. All right. So I've got James stalking in the background and all that, checking on things. Looks like, well, let's do that first, James. Other than Dave Fletcher, who slid in early, competing with everybody to be like the first one to say something. Who else is on? Hey, Dave, who else is on? Hey, look, it's you. Not that you didn't know that. I bet you looked in the mirror this morning and you said, hey, it's you. Right? Anyway, sorry.
He's the only one that said anything so far.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Speaking of the is it you, have you ever, I don't know, been out in public? Happens to me a lot in parking lots and whatnot, where somebody will like look, and maybe you're not like really close, a couple of rows over, or whatever, and somebody will yell, "Hey, is that you?" Anybody ever do that to you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I would say yes. Right. So then they come walking over like, how the hell? Oh, you're not who I thought you were. Well, you asked me if it was me. The answer is yes, it is me. So anyway, I know sometimes it irritates people, but that's okay. Right. Just had something happen. Was it yesterday, something like that? Somebody asked a question and I answered it. And, I got the obligatory, you know what I mean, except that I always answer questions as asked. So, because part of my job is to make sure that students understand at least that one realm on the mandala that has to do with clarity and being specific and, just being a little bit more detail oriented, because vagueness begets vagueness. Anyway, speaking of that realm of the mandala, we just finished up module 1, the redo. So that'll be rolled into a kind of I call it an evergreen thing, but people can do it as a do-it-yourself kind of thing with a little bit of coaching, but just rounded up that foundations of Ninjutsu self-defense program, and we're going to be rolling right into the next one. So we will be starting module 2. It's what I call the realm of the warrior tactician. Right. So we're going to be starting that next week, right? Officially starting next week. But just like I did with module 1, we're going to be kicking everything off. Yes, pun intended. We're going to be kicking everything off with a free online workshop, right? I'm going to stop using the term webinar because I don't know that a lot of people understand it, and it's not specific enough, right? Because this is training. And one of the reasons I do this knowing that 80-90% of the people that sign up for it are just looking for free stuff. One of the reasons I do it is because it also allows me to vet potential students, right? Because I'm not a big fan of teaching anybody because they have a credit card and a pulse, right? So because that's always a recipe for disaster. So anyway, so that's this Wednesday, right? And so if you're in the Eastern United States, Eastern time zone, then we go on at 8 p.m. If you're not, then we go on at whatever your equivalent is to 8 p.m. Eastern. And so James at some point will be posting the link to the registration page, right? There's no cost to it. You just sign up, see what it's all about, that kind of thing, right? But what I'm going to be covering during that course is it's going to give people kind of an idea of what's in the full program. I make no bones about it. I mean, we're segueing people into a full 16-week training program, but the free workshop, if anybody was at the first one that I did for foundations, covered quite a bit, right? Because I wanted to make sure that people understood that there was more depth than some trained monkey in black standing in front of a camera saying, this is this kamae, stand this way. This is this punch, make your hand like this. Doing the same thing this time. So what I'm going to be covering is what I call the 4 pillars of tactical defense, I guess, or tactical thinking, because again, it's the realm of the strategist, the realm of the tactician, right? So one of the things I'm covering during that class on Wednesday is these 3 aspects of training and how each one. I mean, you can do whatever you want, right? You can train any way you want, and most people do. I mean, it's just the way it is, right? But if we could split these things out, okay, there's this principle in the Gyoko school, this 3-in-1, 1-in-3 principle. I talk about this quite often because, well, it's another principle that's important. So in this principle, what you're doing is taking anything, could be a technique, could be another principle or concept, it could be a body movement, it could be anything, right? And so what you're doing is you're looking for at least 3 different aspects, or you're trying to break it into at least 3 different parts, like in the sanshin, right? Sanshin, 3 hearts, right? There are 3 core aspects, and those aspects change depending on which level of transmission we're talking about. There's 3 levels of transmission for every technique, right? So depending on which level you're in, right? So we're either looking at 3 mechanical aspects, or we're looking at 3 dynamic aspects, or we're looking at 3 staging aspects. But you break it into at least 3, right? It's 3 or more. So you can focus your training on that particular aspect, right? That particular part of the training. So in the context of sanshin, right, we could focus just on 5 different footwork patterns, or footwork, not forms. I mean, I guess you could use that term, but footwork patterns, right? And I mean, for a beginner, it's just like move your feet this way, move your whatever, right? But why, right? What are we doing in a fight situation to control space, to control the bubble, to move freely in space? And how does each of these footwork patterns allow you to do that, right? As opposed to only thinking one way to whatever, right? So it's that kind of idea, right? So you break it into 3 aspects, and then there's the flip side to it, because there's always the in and the yo, right? There's always the omote and the ura. So there's also the 1-in-3 side to it, which is being able to take 3 or more techniques and recognize that they're all being driven by the same principle. They're being driven by the same idea, right? I think I covered this. Was it this past Whiteboard Wednesday, James, where I was covering the the Gyakute, and we were looking at. I don't even know if I got that far in the training, but I divided things into Omote and Ura Gyaku principle, right? And then if you understand what the principle is, then you can look at other techniques that physically, step by step, look nothing alike, but they're all doing the same thing, right? And then once you get your head wrapped around this thing and it really starts to take off, you can start to make connections that most people it requires a serious turning in the seat of consciousness for that, right? Like seeing that the Ganseki Nage model in the Kyonapo is identical to Ichimonji no Kata, right? It's being able to understand that all of the kata on the first scroll, the Gyokoryu, point back to the first kata, Koku, right? Kotoryu is not set up the same way. Tagagi Yoshin is not set up the same way. They tend to come in packets, right? Pockets of ideas, right? But either way, right? So we're going to take a look at these three aspects and these four pillars, these four critical concepts or principles that allow somebody to deal with an attacker who's bigger, faster, stronger, trickier, better skilled, or whatever, and break that power or strength dynamic or whatever it is that they have, right, to be able to win. Okay. And so where Foundations course was using ninja ideas and Ninpo Taijutsu to handle the most common attacks that account for 95 to 98% of the assaults that happen every day in the West. This one starts to go deeper into the rabbit hole because, what I want to do with my students is make sure that we cover the most common attacks that are easily handled by what we consider to be basics, right? And then systematically through the remaining the next three modules, module 5 are the things that don't fit neatly into the middle three. And it also acts kind of as a Shodan prep kind of thing. So, but the next three modules go deeper into handling a more adept attacker, right? And so we look at attacker type, right? We look at matching and developing and learning skills and tools that best fit a given attacker type, right? And then, obviously we take it even farther in the black belt levels where we look at the mandala and we look at how the mandala shows you that if you understand the attacker type and their fight psychology, right, then the answer to dealing with them ideally is on the opposite side of the mandala, right? Primarily, and then other ones kind of are a secondary, tertiary kind of thing. That's second place and third place for those who are not native English speakers, right? It's another way that I vet students, right? So anyway, so hopefully you guys will be able to make it. And yes, there will be a replay, but it will only be up for a limited amount of time because just like with this last one, doors open, we let folks in for training. Of course, you can take, this thing that I'm doing on Wednesday is very much like a whiteboard Wednesday, but it's pulled from this next phase of training that my students normally go through. And so, obviously, there is an agenda, right? I'm not hiding any of that stuff. There's an agenda, but just like with a whiteboard Wednesday, those of you who are very, very adept at things, you've been around for a while, you have the fight experience, those kind of things, you should be able to look at that and be able to run with it on your own. And for those who want help, well, then that's what the program's for the next 16 weeks. So anyway, that being said, that should have given enough people enough time to jump on. I'm not going to be speaking about that again until, I don't know, maybe the end, just to remind everybody about the Wednesday thing. So this Wednesday, November 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern. So whatever the equivalent is for you, right? So James, anybody else jump on before I go rock and roll on this stuff?
The only other one that said anything over on YouTube was Bill P. I assume that's Bill Paget.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Awesome.
And Dave said he was first, The Art of Winning. And Victor just said good evening.
Awesome. Hi, guys. Okay. So I really want to take a look at this idea of like finding a mentor, because for those of you who know me and have been around for a while, you know how some words irritate the shit out of me, right? Because people just throw them around like it's not that it's thoughtless. They think they're being specific, but it turns into a damn cliche, right? Like the word warrior. If I hear another fucking football team or sports team or whatever, or I don't know, pacifist group or whatever, calling themselves warrior, I'm going to run to my bathroom and throw the hell up because it's bullshit. Same thing with the word wisdom. Same thing with the word enlightenment. You know, James, you know how much I love enlightened, right? Okay. Enlighten me. Not possible. Okay. Any more than I can freaking motivate you. Okay. I can get you to comply, right? I can cause obedience, but one, you're not going to like it. Two, it's going to be painful because suffrage is involved. But let's not call it motivation. It's kind of like in the kids' classes at the dojo when I ask them what discipline means, right? Because that's the second part of our 3-part student creed, right? I believe in what I study. I am disciplined. I'm ready to learn and advance. And I pick words out of there because it's one thing to memorize it so you can pass the test, or it's one thing to memorize it so you can say it in class, or just like people recite things in church or whatever, right? But do you know what the hell you're saying, right? Do you know why? Do you know the significance behind it, right? So with the kids, just the base level, I want to know, do you know what the word discipline means? But as soon as I say, what does discipline mean? And then I give it a quick pause, and then I say, I don't mean the nice word your parents use in place of the word punishment. I'm disciplining you. Bullshit. Okay. You can train me, right? Pavlovian style, right? Or you can give me reasons to want to do something, or choose to do something because I either am going to get a reward or I'm going to avoid pain or suffrage or whatever, which is, that's perfectly viable for the human being. And I know we live in an era where that's not fashionable, but from a warrior perspective, and from, regardless of whether we're talking about spiritual warrior or ones with swords, right? To understand that for the average person, ego will not do something unless there is a promise of reward or a threat of punishment, right? To understand that takes you way farther down the line to be able to, quote unquote, motivate people, right? But you're not really motivating them. What you're doing is you're pushing triggers within them, or you're triggering mechanisms within themselves, right? But you have to know them. You have to be able to speak their listen. And when you can do that, then you can trigger a response that moves them in the direction that they need to go, or if you're manipulating the system, where you want them to go, because they're acting in their own self-interest, right? Way too many people, even in the martial arts, right? They want to treat students like the students are there for the same reasons that they were there when they started training, or the students are there, or should be, God damn it, for the same reasons that they are now currently in their training, because they can't remember, right, what motivated them to get started, or they don't want to admit what motivated them to get started, right? If it were fear or anxiety, or fantasizing about being a tough guy, or whatever, right? So understanding how that kind of stuff works is a huge thing, right? So there's this wide range of things we can go into, and that's not the topic tonight, but I really hate I really hate when people throw things around. Just doing a little bit of prep for this episode, did a little bit of research to see what kind of mentor or mentorship or mentoring quotes are out online. And I disagree with 95% of them, because a mentor is much more than even the teacher or I don't know, the cheerleader or whatever. A lot of this stuff was just pointing out that, a mentor doesn't walk in front of somebody. They walk beside them, and they show them what they're capable of. And again, I respectfully disagree. Take it in whatever direction you want to go with it. But yeah, so anyway, we're going to start with this idea of teacher, because there is an aspect of teaching, right? There is an aspect of learning, right? And that's why you get a quote unquote mentor. But there's something really, really deep that it took me 20 years, almost 30 years, to understand about mentors, that had I known that, had I accepted it way earlier, I'd be way farther ahead. Right? So take that for whatever it's worth. But anyway, I do want to talk about these different phases of the instructor, or not the instructor, instructor, teacher, whatever, we'll get to those. Because I cover these in the online instructor training program. It's just a version of the thing that I do at the dojo for my people that are actually teaching on the floor, right? Because I'm not, and I'm not allowing those people that help me at the academy fall prey to the belief that just because somebody has a certain color of belt around their waist, that qualifies them to teach, right? Maybe, but anyway, we'll touch on those things and see. You'll see how my brain works. Okay, so but before I do that, I want to share a little thing that Hatsumi Sensei taught on, that was about the idea of relationships and the connection and the bond between the people, right? Now, he's covered it in a couple of different ways. He's covered it from the perspective of love and how that shows up. He's covered it from the perspective of like a learning, supporting kind of relationship, those kind of things. But he said in Japan, there are three relationships, right? There are three levels to this idea. And so the parent-child relationship is level one. The husband-wife, intimate partner, whatever you want to call it, whatever people are calling it these days, that's level two. And the teacher-student, I would say mentor-mentee relationship is level three, or is the third level. And the reason why I said mentor mentee is because I believe that most people, right, instructors and students, kind of have something between, or something extra, something, I don't know. I don't even know if it's between level two and level three, right? I believe some aspire to be certain things. But it's been my experience with mentors that, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, we'll leave that loop open. All right. So anyway, let's go back to this instructor kind of thing, because if you're ever working with me, dealing with me, and that could be student teacher, that could be you're on a project with me, you're I don't know, we've put together a seminar together, whatever, right? I want to be very, very clear with the people that I'm working with as to how we're going to define certain things, right? Because again, vagueness begets vagueness, right? And vagueness creates dukkha, right? And for those of you in the 7 steps program and have gone through the 37 fundamentals program, you know that dukkha can be what it sounds like, right? But it's really difficult to translate into English. So for those of you who don't know, it can range anywhere from out and out shit and suffering, like really bad, pain, those kind of things, right? All the way to frustration, confusion, dissatisfaction. It's a wide range of things, right? So anyway, I know I use the word right a lot. You don't have to agree with me, right? You can think that I'm full of shit, and I'm okay with that too, right? So anyway, so in the instructor training program, we define these 3 aspects of the learning paradigm and the people who are in positions to do that based on what that person is capable of or how they tend to approach this thing. Does that mean that they use these exact terms for themselves? No. Okay. Just like enlightenment and mentorship and warrior and all that, people do substitution word games all the time. Okay. So, here we call it, okay, whatever, right? I don't care what you call it. What do you mean by it? Okay. So, well, you know what? Let me finish up the Hatsumi Sensei thing. Okay. So if we think about the 3 levels that he was talking about with the connections, right? If we think about it from a learning teaching paradigm, right? Parents teach their children. Children learn from their parents. Parents learn from their children. Okay. But in that first level, what we're really looking at is one person really, really dependent upon the other because they have no clue about the way the world works, right? So everything from what do we call this to what's the right way to do it, whatever, right? And so, the child is looking to the parent, and that kind of love comes from a sense of that they need to be provided for, not just food and shelter and clothing, right? They need to know how to navigate this social structure that they live in, right? And one of the problems that I see today is everybody wants to make everything fucking vague, right? Everybody wants to, well, we'll let the child sort it out for himself. Yeah, okay, great. Except that the discernment faculties of the brain haven't grown, let alone getting switched on until somewhere between the ages of 18 and 25. Discernment's really fucking important for knowing what's really right, what's really wrong, being able to make good choices, those kind of things, right? And not just being pulled along by your nuts and what feels good I'm going to do and what feels bad I'm going to avoid, right? So anyway, so parents' love is shown by provision, right? Child's love, and this is going to be a bad word for a lot of people, but a child's love is shown through obedience. Okay. And that doesn't mean like they're a slave. It means, look, this is how we do things, right? When you're older and have more experiences about the way the world works and the way there are other options and other paths that you could follow or whatever, you can do anything you want, right? But we're going to create a baseline so that 1, you don't die while you're in our care, and 2, nobody wants to kick your fucking teeth in because we're just going to let you be a freaking mongrel and do whatever the hell you want, right? So I know I'm a little terse on this tonight, but this is one of those really, really strong things, because I just dealt with 2 more people that were pissed off because one, I wouldn't accept one of them as a student, and the other one, we didn't even get that far, right? Because if you can't show up for 2 scheduled meetings, 1 I'll give you, right? Life happens. Second one, yeah, and then you're going to beg and plead afterwards. Don't give up on me. I didn't have a chance to give up on you, right? I can't be more vested in, and this is something about mentors. I can't be more vested in somebody's success or even getting started than they are. It's impossible for anybody to be more vested in someone's success than that individual person, right? But, here we are in a drive-up window society. So anyway, so in that relationship, right, the child is dependent upon, okay? So yes, the parents have a responsibility, heavy responsibility, make sure they're learning the right lessons and all that. And if they don't, then, there's an issue, right? And up to a certain point in a child's development, the parent has to steer. And then they can start loosening things up right into the teen years and all that, because one, the child wants to do things, but the parent has to be okay with the child making mistakes. Okay. And there has to be this guiding and whatever, right? But there's a sense of provision, right? The child's going to start to push against things and whatnot, but either way, right? So, but if the parent doesn't provide the lessons, I don't know if you've ever seen this before or not. A kid acts a certain way, or they come home with the shitty grades or whatever, and the parent who has done nothing to teach them how to do that particular thing, or to check to make sure they were doing their homework instead of playing video games, because again, kid's going to do what feels good and is going to avoid what, because they don't have long range, long-term discernment faculties, right? So if the parent doesn't teach it, but then the kid drops the ball, and then the parent's all over the kid, like, where did you think it was okay to do that? How could you not know how to do this simple, basic thing? You want to explain why your grades are in the toilet, and okay, well, no guidance. So our kid's going to resist, of course, but they also don't know how the world works. Okay. So it's a very different kind of teaching, receiving kind of relationship, right? It's very dependent. Okay. And then you have this level 2